Hey everyone, it's Myriam and welcome back to another video. Once again, I would like to thank Squarespace for sponsoring another one of my videos. They've been really supportive of my channel recently and I'm really thankful for that. So stay tuned for a little more information at the end of this video, and in the meantime, let's get painting. So for this week's video, I decided to use some footage I had for a few months. These are landscape studies I did from reference in Gouache, and I painted them I think back in July 2017, so a few months ago. And there are several reasons why I didn't upload them before that. One of the main reasons is that I usually like to alternate between having studies and personal work on my channel. I think it keeps it interesting and it doesn't, just keeps bringing out the same content all the time. And lately I just felt like I had uploaded a few studies and so I wanted to focus on personal work a bit more. But also, you may have noticed, and this is a silly personal thing, there's not technically any reason behind this, but it's also part of why I didn't upload the footage before, and that is that I usually do my studies in triptychs, in threes. You may have noticed that usually when I upload a study video, there's 3 paintings in there, and that's usually because I like the number 3 as a study thing. Just generally, as when I do studies, I do 3 paintings in one go, and so I usually like to upload them that way. I feel like it keeps a certain consistency and a nice rhythm. I just like how it keeps the video kind of stimulating and kind of interesting and all that. And so it's just a number I like, and for some reason some part of me is irked at the idea of only having 2 in a video. It's like I haven't worked hard enough. It's silly, I know it's silly, but for some reason it influenced my choice about whether to upload this footage or not, because I did do 3 studies for this video, but I hated the last one. And for a long time I was on the fence about whether I was going to actually upload it because I hated that last painting so much. But in the end, I decided that it would be a teachable moment for myself, and maybe it could actually be interesting to you guys too, to hear me talk about why I hated that particular piece. And also, I decided to repaint it recently. I'm trying to improve, maybe do things differently, see if I could capture the things I felt that I had missed last time. And so, instead of 3 paintings in this video, there are 4. Except that the 2 last ones are of the same reference picture. If you guys want to know what references I used, I'll find a way to put a link down to them in the description below if you guys want to know. So the first 2 paintings, this one that you currently see me doing on the screen, and the next one after that, I'm actually decently happy with. This first one was the most difficult as far as composition and colours, but the last one that I'm talking about, the one that I hated, it was a tricky reference picture as it was, because I chose it because I knew that it would be a challenge. I knew I probably wouldn't necessarily be able to do it, and that's because the colours and values are pretty even. Like, there's not a very high contrast, and there's a lot of elements in it and a lot of detail, and so it was a practice for me to try and get to the point of the picture rather than try and reproduce the details as faithfully as I could, which is often my problem with when I work from reference. I don't actually focus on the right things. I think I focus on details too much, and as a result it takes away from the message of the picture. So that's something I want to practice, and that's partly why I do landscape studies, because there's always a lot of information in landscape studies, and but what I want to capture, what I find is particularly admirable in paintings that I really enjoy from other people, is how mood can come across in landscapes, how you can get you look at the picture of that landscape and you get the atmosphere, you get almost temperature, almost the kind of, if it's fog, you can almost feel it, and you get the emotion you would get if you were actually looking at the landscape, even though it's not a photorealistic representation of it. Does that make any sense? So that's something that I'm particularly in awe of, and something I would really love to be able to reproduce in my own paintings. I'm very far from it. I personally are not up to the standard I would like to be for myself. Again, that's not at all a reflection of how I think of anyone else's work. It's just my personal standards, and I'm not there yet. But I want to keep practicing that, and I realize that mood and atmosphere is really one of those things that I struggle with, especially when it comes to reference. So this video is a little bit about failing, trying again and failing again, and how that's not necessarily a bad thing. It rarely is, actually, especially in drawing, especially if you go by it the right way in your mind. So if you don't let it beat you, you can actually learn a lot and end up the victor in the situation in some way. So I haven't scripted this video. I have no bullet points to talk about, so it might be a bit rambly, it might be a bit random. Bear with me. I hope you guys don't mind that. You generally don't seem to, so but I hope you'll enjoy this one. So those two paintings I did of that same reference picture at the end of this video. The first one, I think one of my biggest problems was what I mentioned a few minutes ago, and it was the fact that I think I focused on representing the details as accurately as possible too much. Again, I'm working in gouache. I'm trying to be loose. I'm not trying to be photorealistic. So when I say I focus on the details too much, it's to an extent. It's not obviously accurately necessarily, but you'll see when I start doing it that I tried almost painting every piece of grass, every kind of texture that was in the reference picture as much as possible, and I think that took me away from the mood I was trying to capture from that reference image. And in the end, when I finished, I basically overworked the painting, and I think that's mainly the problem I had. I think, for one, it was the third study I did, which usually means it's my least favorite, and usually means that is the one I'm least successful with, because I'm getting tired, I'm losing my focus, and so I have a higher chance to fail. That's perfectly normal, and I don't begrudge myself that at all. That's probably why I do only 3, because my focus can't really withstand more than that, but in one sitting at least. And that's why it's actually, I learn a lot from the last studies I usually do, because I lose my focus, I go back to the bad habits I've accumulated over the years. And it's a good point, it's a good element for me, it's a good practice for me to actually point out what those bad habits, well, not necessarily bad habits, but those habits I want to shed personally are still in me and still come back when I let my guard down, basically. So as you can see here, I've started doing this study that I was talking about, and I've already started putting too much detail in, at least in my opinion. Again, this is all my opinion, this is not necessarily what should be done, but when in my own practice and for what I wanted to improve on, this was the problem with what I did. I think I went for too much detail. You can see in the background here, the background if I wanted to just capture atmosphere and the kind of sunset feeling of like the earth being colder and mist slowly rising, and just that kind of, I don't know, that atmosphere you get at the end of the day when the sun is setting, or when the sun is rising, it's a similar atmosphere. But I didn't capture that because that background has too much detail. I tried to do all those little herbs and little strands of flowers and white texture that's in the background, and that just, if you look at the reference picture, it's not something that your brain registers. It's not something, or at least not mine. Again, I can't speak for everyone else, but when I look at that picture, my first feeling is that cold green grass and then the bright sky in the background. I don't register every strand of grass that's in the background. It just looks kind of misty and fluffy, but you don't register every single strand of grass. And I think my problem was that I was looking at it too much. I was trying too hard and too stressed about trying to reproduce that image, and I ended up focusing on the wrong elements. And I wouldn't say that my second attempt at painting that reference picture was particularly successful either. There are elements that I'm happier with. I'm happier with the brightness of the sky in the second painting. I'm happier with my values. I think I captured the darkness of the grass and kind of its wetness from the mist a bit better. In this one, I think the sky, if you turned my painting black and white, I think the sky would probably be of the same value as the grass, and so it doesn't make it stand out as much. The color is obviously very different, so that kind of tricks the eye a little bit, but I don't think the values are properly distributed. In the next attempt I tried to keep that more faithful to the reference picture and to the mood. So you see here I started very, very dark with that grass, and I didn't touch the sky, hardly any at all, throughout the whole painting, whereas in the previous one I actually had painted the sky blue and then I went back on top of it with gouache with orange. That was one of my beginner mistakes with gouache, where I thought the orange was actually going to just completely cover the blue of the sky that I had applied, but it didn't, because obviously gouache, although it's opaque, it still takes, it's a bit like oil. I would assume any painting would do that, and I wasn't experienced enough to realize that, but it was going to take some of the value from the color I'd applied behind it, so it wasn't actually going to be as bright as I wanted it. If I had wanted it to stay bright, I should have kept the white of the sky behind it, because technically the sky, we all know it's blue, but with that brightness of the orange, it's almost white on the fringes of the orange, and so me painting that blue in the first attempt was wrong. So I tried to keep that going with this sky in the second attempt. As you can see, I'm not focusing on details of the grass as much. I'm trying to stay a lot looser. It looks a little bit like I'm painting with watercolor actually, which was interesting. I didn't expect myself to do that at all. Again, I think there are some things I could improve, but my aim with that second painting was to not do the mistakes I did with the first painting. So obviously I was going to do other mistakes, but I was trying not to reproduce the mistakes I'd done with the other one. And I'm happier with the mood in that second picture. I'm happier with the feeling that comes off of it. They are two very different, they have their own merits and their own faults, but it was a really, really interesting exercise for me, and I might even try to paint it a third time. I'm not entirely sure yet. But my point with this exercise was to try and get over my feeling of failure, because I've always believed that failing is only really a failure if you don't try to learn from it. So if you just wallow in misery about it and decide that you've failed, that's when you've really failed. And so I usually try, even when I feel really unhappy about something, to learn at least one thing from it. And this exercise was humbling to say the least, but also kind of uplifting, because I realized that I could bounce back from feeling like I'd failed, and I could actually feel proud of myself for failing because I learned so much from that failure. And I failed twice, but in different ways. I succeeded in some aspects of it, and I failed in other aspects of it, but because I learned overall exactly how I'd failed and why I felt like I failed, I actually felt like I was more knowledgeable about myself and my way of working and my way of thinking, really, after the fact. So apologies for the little unstructured rambling topic. I probably will do a proper video where I actually try and write down all my bullet points before and give it a structure so that I can talk about failure a bit more in depth, but I wanted to talk about it in this video a little bit just because I had something to illustrate it. But anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this little rambly video and that you enjoyed those little paintings. All the references are obviously in the description below if you want to check them out. Stay tuned for a little announcement about Squarespace and their offer to you guys, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Take really good care of yourselves and have a lovely day. Bye everyone. Hey everyone, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Squarespace. They've been really lovely and sponsored a few of my videos in the past couple months. I'm really, really thankful to them because that was a great help, but also because I was able to build my website with them, and I'm actually really happy with it. And I'm also pretty confident that I can actually keep up with it, which is one of the problems I've had in the past with other different kind of providers, where the interface was just too complicated for me to have the time to sit down and understand it. And whereas the Squarespace is actually really intuitive, really easy, and easy enough that it actually became fun, and I actually had the time to just kind of browse around, look at all the templates they have, understand how I could customize them myself to my liking, and create a website that I was actually really happy with. with. And I personally think websites are a really important thing for artists because they're a really good way, really professional way to show your work to people who might be interested. And it's just more professional than having a social media page. Social media is obviously very important too, but websites is just this really professional looking place where your work just looks its best. So if you're interested in creating your own website, I strongly recommend checking out Squarespace. They have a free trial to allow you to build your own website, and once you're happy with your product, you can go over to squarespace.com/Myriam and use the code Myriam for 10% off your first purchase.